Well, welcome to the Always Free podcast, guys. I hope you're doing well. This is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. If it's the first time you're listening, welcome. If it is the first time, go back to episode 1. If you, at least after you've listened to this, if you want to listen to this one, but you'll get the most value starting there. And if you're not new, welcome back. Today we're talking about Bitcoin. We're going to talk about all things Bitcoin, and I'm with my next door neighbour, Simon, who's a Bitcoin enthusiast. So welcome, mate.
Hey Jay, thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.
Good, yeah. So I moved into this house in 2019, and Simon moved next door quite soon after.
Yeah, about a year after.
Maybe the next summer of 2020.
Yeah, it was.
And we've had a few discussions over the years, and Simon's become an advocate for Bitcoin.
Indeed.
What's the story, mate? Like, tell us how did you get into it? What did you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I initially started, I won't give you my CV, but generally if I go back in history a little bit, I went into, started the world in advertising, marketing. So I've been a marketeer from kind of day one, kind of built myself up into being a salesperson, I guess, and just kind of selling advertising for many years. And then really found a kind of sort of area of expertise in technology and really love tech. And I was just kind of thinking about, how things are moving over the years, and, in the 90s to where we are, even to now, things moved on rapidly. Yeah, and just kind of looked at moving from industry to industry. Had a mobile app agency in 2011, which was really good fun. Basically set up enterprise apps for companies. So we worked with people like BP, Philips Technology, Hitachi, if you remember the brand, which is still going now. And I've always been kind of in an investment of some sort. Always invested into Bitcoin, from an early stage, I guess, probably from 2020. But prior to that was basically real estate. So really built up a portfolio of real estate, really enjoyed that, and then got to a point of going, there's got to be different things out there, and then stumbled across the Bitcoin area, basically.
And what was it about Bitcoin that attracted you initially?
That's a really good question. I was looking at, look, here's the thing about Bitcoin for me is, like we just spoke about before we started the show, if you look at real estate, for example, over the years, and I've got many friends, and you probably know a lot of people in real estate, and it's a great vehicle to start with, but over the years it's become less viable, I suppose, from taxes, but also looking at things like, compliance is becoming a complete headache. And what was considered a really good vehicle back in the 90s, now has completely changed, I think, for the worse. And a lot of my properties that I've had were sort of service accommodation. And, the compliance on those areas is really, really difficult. So I was looking at, all different types of asset classes. And I guess for me, it was looking at things like gold, silver. And then in 2020 came along Bitcoin. I stumbled across that. And I think this is what happens with Bitcoin is you kind of stumble into it.
And then you go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, completely. Did that happen to you?
Yeah. I mean, I went into Bitcoin I went into Bitcoin in 2018, and as a trader. So I was looking at not as trading it, but I was looking at the charts. I was looking at technical analysis. I was testing behavioral patterns on. There's something called the Wall Street cheat sheet, and it's basically a pattern of market participants' behavior based, and it's all revolves around human emotion. It's when you do an IPO, you'll see that it will rally, and then it will kind of fall off, and then there's like people selling off, and you can almost predict these every time there's an IPO. And I was testing that against an ICO, which was Bitcoin, and I in my trading plan, I can only put money into something if it's at least 10 years old, because I need 10 years of sample data. So I tested this, found a couple of compression channels that are relevant to people into Bitcoin, because people into Bitcoin, they're like, why'd you look at, you just keep buying it, right? That's the approach. And of course I know that, but I was looking at it from that standpoint. I did a lot of testing. I publicly went onto YouTube in 2018 and did this video, and I said, it's 3,825. I'm getting in here. I'm gonna, buy here.
Earlier than me then. Wow.
And I got in, and that was 2 years, 2 months, and I took the profits on that. Yeah. It was a massive return. It was great. And then a month later, I put straight back in. So in 2020, February 2020, it was. I went straight back in. So, and I've been in ever since. And then in April 2024, I was buying a Bitcoin a month for a while, and then and now I'm pound cost averaging or cost averaging into Bitcoin, but not at the rate of a Bitcoin a month. But I'm continuing to buy. So yeah, I mean, I like tech. I'm into tech, and I get technology. So that's always something that resonates with me. I have to understand investments. I don't 100% understand Bitcoin, and I don't think that anyone on the planet 100% understands Bitcoin. 100%. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with that. But what I do know is that I believe in the future of it.
Yeah.
And as you say, with property or gold or physical assets, or even just the monetary system at the moment, fiat currency is so inefficient, it's ineffective, it's not good, it's not liquid, it's not, and we'll talk about liquidity actually, because we was discussing lending against Bitcoin and those features now, because people are like, well, if you're putting all your money into Bitcoin and you can't spend it, like how do you live? And
what do you do with it? Yeah.
And there's ways of doing that now. But yeah, so like you, I was just I just went into a rabbit hole. Then I started reading Hard Money You Can't Fuck With and books like that, and then you just kind of go, well, why isn't everyone doing this?
Yeah.
And then you kind of take the side of, you're almost like, you become a like an activist for Bitcoin. It's like a preacher for Bitcoin, right?
Well, my thing was with actually it was Kawasaki. It was really looking at what he did, read the Rich Dad Poor Dad, the cash flow quadrants, all that kind of stuff, and I like the aspect of you building your asset classes up and understanding what can you do against that. You can leverage against property, and I've done that for years. You can have a whole real estate portfolio.
Yeah.
You can leverage against the value of the properties, and take cash out, basically do what you want. And then it got me thinking, actually, there's more to Bitcoin than just its cryptocurrency. In fact, so much so I see it as, and you probably hear about this online as well, I see it as cryptocurrency in terms of the terminology, is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So when you look at it like that, you go, hold on a minute, there's something special happening with Bitcoin specifically because, it has got a cap of 21 million coins. It's in demand. It's fully transportable. And if you compare it, we go back to the analogy of real estate. This is what gets me. So you can have a portfolio of real estate, say 50 properties over the years. You've done well leveraging, taking that money out, really enjoying yourself with that money. But it comes with a huge hassle. And that was the way to do things. It would be, stocks and shares, and still is to a degree, depending on what country you live in, obviously. And my view is on property, it's just got to the point now where the government don't want you to earn money out of that particular asset class. So when you look at Bitcoin, you go, hold on a minute, where are we in the top 10 assets of the world or 15 assets of the world? And Bitcoin is now on the 5th position. So I think I looked yesterday, it's 1.6 trillion pounds in terms of market cap. You compare that to gold, which is 16 trillion. You start to realize, hold on a minute, this is becoming serious. What started out as a cryptocurrency, per se, is now becoming sort of more legitimized, I think, over the years. And I think that was it for me, was really, to answer your question, was looking at what asset class is going to do well in the future. And I think we're going for an evolution of the gold rush, but with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that still don't get it, and I get that. It's still in the grand scheme of things as an asset class, relatively new.
So, look, investing is important. Buying assets is important. If you want to achieve any level of financial independence, you have to basically take your surplus income and invest it in something that's outperforming inflation at least. And you have to grow the money that you're investing and not be subject to just sat in your bank dying with inflation, right? So obviously it's a good idea, but a lot of people see Bitcoin as a risk. They see, what gave you the confidence to start putting more and more money into it? How? There's one thing about believing about it and seeing the bigger picture, but what? All right, let's put it this way. If someone's listening to this, how would they gain? What would you recommend that they do to gain enough confidence, or how to educate themselves to know what you know and what I know about Bitcoin? What would you suggest for people who don't know what it is?
I think time in the market. as in time in the market.
Yeah.
So it's like any asset class for me, whether it's gold, silver, real estate, whatever, stocks and shares, is you've got to do your research.
Yeah.
You know, it's like with property, it's like you choose your area.
Mm-hmm.
Is it buy to let? Is it service accommodation, or is it commercial let?
Yeah.
Whatever. There's all these kind of fundamentals that come into it. I think for me, it was studying what is it, what's behind it, can it go wrong? You know, I come from a tech background, so I was trying to find flaws in it,
Yeah.
and then look at the analysis over a 5-year or 10-year period, and you're like, well, actually, yes, the killer word is it's volatile, it's scary, but actually, as everyone says on this who knows about Bitcoin, that volatility is your friend in this market because it goes up and down. To get a high up, you need to have a high down. You know, it's not real estate, it's not gold that will just comfortably sit and rise very, very slowly over 20-year periods. So I think for me, it was doing that research into that, understanding who else is in it. So if I knew if there were celebrities that were endorsing it, that understood why they're picking that, are there other investors that are talking about it? Why are they picking that over real estate, for example? And then it comes into a point where you're looking at retail investors, and then you go across to, okay, now it's challenging the commercial world. So that for me was the big sort of wake up call to go, hold on a minute, businesses are now talking about it. But yeah, in the early days for me, it was quite difficult because you're like, it's just retail investors and Bitcoiners that are just maximists.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know, you got to take that quite lightly because you've got to make your own opinion formed of all of that, you know.
So you've started your own, you've started talking more about this openly on social media because you're really passionate about it, and like most people who get Bitcoin, they kind of want to tell the world about it, which is great. There was a guy who was building this studio actually, and he was asking me about Bitcoin, and I said, look, don't put any money into Bitcoin if you can't afford to lose it, right? Because if you don't know what it is, right? Obviously, you don't know what it is if you're asking that question anyway. I'm a big firm believer. You don't take stock tips from anyone. You don't take investment tips from anyone. You know, do your research, like you just said. Understand what you're investing in. This guy's like, oh, I want to put some money in Bitcoin, you know, and it's always on that bit where it's just going up. You know, everyone wants the
not on the way down.
Everyone wants that, right? So
although it should be on the way down, actually.
It should be on the way
like,
down.
For me, I see when it goes down, I see it's on sale, right?
Exactly.
I want to buy it. Yeah.
Exactly. But this guy, I said, only invest in it if you know what it is, and if you don't know what it is, invest money you can afford to lose, and it's not going to keep you up at night.
Yeah.
And don't look at it. You know, don't watch it. Don't watch the price of it, because that will be enough to give you grey hair because it's so volatile, and which is good, but it's so volatile. And anyway, 2 months later, you find out. You know, he tells my wife Sarah, oh yeah, I had to sell. You know, I had to sell out because it was going down. I couldn't afford to. You know, and he sold. And this was about 2 months ago, right? We're now at all-time highs, and when you look at the chart of the history of Bitcoin, and you see this asset that's only ever gone up over time. You know, yes, there's little dips and stuff. You ask yourself, how can you lose money? How did you lose money? And that comes down to your mindset. And I think when you've got volatility that you can't, like your mindset can't keep up with because you don't understand it, that is what's going to stop you from being able to earn the money in the first place.
Completely.
Right? So people have amazing opportunity right now to go and, you know, add this asset to your portfolio, but you're probably not going to be able to do it successfully if you don't understand it, right? So kind of my question was like, where do you go? What would be a good resource that you would recommend that people could learn more about it, like a book or what do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, for me, it was looking at it from two sides of it. It was looking at it from my own perspective, but also from a business perspective. So I've got a lot of friends and sort of colleagues in the world that I've kind of known over the years that really wanted to kind of know more about Bitcoin. That was a driver for me. So I'm kind of self-taught to a degree.
Yeah.
So you can look at my channel.
Right.
I've got a channel called Go Permissionless. I talk about things like that. I'm quite new to the market, but I'm passionate, and it's trying to understand where is Bitcoin going.
Yeah.
You know, what's the benefits from a business perspective, but also from a retail investor. And it's interesting what you said, because when you look at what a retail investor is looking at Bitcoin now, I said to you before we started the show, I've got a friend of mine who's a Thames Water engineer, and he now wants to buy Bitcoin because he's seen it go up and it's all magical. But you're absolutely right; it's bang on. It's trying to understand and is it right for you, and can you afford to lose it?
Yeah,
they're the two key things. But yeah, I think for looking at asset classes, I go back to my figure of it's a 1.6 trillion market cap at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The perception is it's going to be a 15x of that quite easily. Yeah. This is what market makers are talking about out there and professionals in the market, business people. So I think it's for me it's like being in the 1990s now entering property.
Yeah,
it's exactly like that. You look at the Michael Saylors of the world, they're all, and it comes from Saylor himself. It's like buying, in my opinion, it's like buying real estate in Manhattan in 1940.
Yeah.
Which was going to be mightily cheap. So yeah, it's just there's various places you can go, but I think it's just understanding, real estate, precious metals, any sort of asset class, and then comparing it to what Bitcoin is. I think if you can do your research on that, then actually the penny drops. That's what worked for me. I'm not super clever, but I'm like, I understand these asset classes, but I'm like, how can Bitcoin benefit me in the long run?
Yeah.
And it's that purchasing power that we're going through at the moment with inflation.
Yeah.
Where actually your money is being depleted week on week, especially at the moment, globally. And that's what Bitcoin, I feel, is the sort of winner in the market. It preserves my money and my purchasing power goes up rather than down.
Yeah.
Over time anyway.
So you mentioned the benefits of Bitcoin. Like, I think we should talk about the benefits of Bitcoin in business, personally, retail investors or whatever. But as you say, 21 million. The way that, just from a simplistic point of view, there's as you say, 21 million Bitcoin. I think 4 million are lost, or 5 million. They're lost. So there's
only 1 more million to mine. I think now, isn't it?
1 more million to mine, right? So yeah, cool. Let's just call it 18, 19, 20 million Bitcoin. And that's finite supply, and the proportion to which the billionaires of the world will allocate a small piece of Bitcoin to their portfolio as opposed to the masses, there just won't be enough to go around, right? So that will drive in itself, that will drive Bitcoin up tremendously, significantly. So as over these next few years, as more on these, as the rich add Bitcoin to their portfolios, that will take an unfair portion from everyone else's opportunity, right? Which means the price of Bitcoin, what I think we're going to see is a massive surge over the next 3 or 4 years in the price of Bitcoin, and then it will level off, and then it will, it will be used as a currency worldwide, and you won't see the volatility, you won't, the opportunity might not be there anymore. I don't know. I don't want to scare anyone listening, but that's how I see it. That's the reality. It's like, as you say, the property opportunity in the 90s. There was a period of time where you earn a load of money, and then bang, you can't do it anymore, right? So that will come. That time will come where this opportunity won't be there. But I don't want to put the fear of fear into the listeners, because I really don't like the FOMO thing on it. I don't want people thinking, oh no, I've got to get in now. I've got to get in, and then they start beating themselves up. Because look, at the end of the day, your happiness is what matters most. It's not really making a load of money on Bitcoin.
That's really well said. That is really well said.
You'll live all right.
You can get, and I think this is the problem as well. I've got a lot of friends that come to me and they're like, Bitcoin's the way forward. But have you looked at such and such? I'm like, look, I've had my fingers burnt. I invested when Alex Machinsky had the Celsius platform, which is the BlockFi similar thing. Where you put your Bitcoin into an exchange, which is Celsius, and you lock your Bitcoin away, and you not lend against it, you loan against it, and you get money out, or you lock it away and you basically get yield on it. And then that was a complete scam. Yeah. Fortunately, I was quite lucky. I was one of the very few lucky ones. I actually got a bit of money back from the payout, but. You've just got to be careful. And I think with Bitcoin, it's still like 2009 it came out, right?
Yeah.
And it's only now really becoming legitimized to a point of view. And it's only now you're having countries and companies buying it onto the balance sheet. And it's still so new that you've got, it's probably 10 or 15 companies globally starting to, bigger companies starting to kind of invest into that on their balance sheet. So, we're probably 5 years away when this will happen, where it goes completely crazy. But I still think it's, you've got to do your research. And it's, for me, going back to one of the questions you asked, was really, why would I choose it and how did I learn out of it? It was really education to kind of, better myself, understand the asset class more, and see where it's going for the future, essentially.
Yeah. So what are the benefits then? What are some of the benefits that you personally see in business? Business. Let's start there.
The biggest one for me, and this is putting my real estate hat on at the moment, I think is, like, we were talking offline before we started, and that was, I've got a few properties that I was trying to sell, and they've been on the market, some of them for 6 months, so you've got this great asset class, real estate, which is great. It goes up in theory in price, but without taking into consideration inflation. But they want to sell that, right? And I want to get cash. I need some liquid cash. Real estate's great, but until you actually need the cash, you don't realise, oh my God, I need money. And then 6 months later, you haven't got that money. So for me, having that ability to have an asset class that is in I was going to say mobile phone, but this is a cold wallet, but having an asset class that I can have in a cold wallet or on my phone to actually review and then sell whenever I need it to is just pure amazing.
To pay for breakfast, to pay for lunch.
Yeah.
It's like, I say that because I always talked about real estate on this podcast with what you've just explained. It's like, it's great having capital gains, but to live, you need income and you need cash and you need liquidity, right? You can't break a brick off your house and pay for breakfast with it.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
So when it's locked in a house, you are governed by the demand in the housing market. As you say, it's been on the market 6 months. I'm seeing houses are taking ages to sell. The properties are taking ages to sell at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's the truth of it. So if you need cash, properties, not the one. But then saying that, there's also the argument that people are saying, well, I don't want to sell any of my Bitcoin. So we're now talking about there's companies loaning against your Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's happening as we speak. There's a few companies out there. We were speaking again offline about Strike. They're starting to formulate that, but also I think it's LDN. They're a big options group on that in terms of lending against your Bitcoin. And just to kind of, just go back one little bit in terms of the houses. And you're absolutely right. You said that is you can't, once you've got that real estate, I can't break bits off and sell it. And again, it comes back to what do I do within Bitcoin? Do I sell my Bitcoin, or as we're talking now, is how do I lend against it? And it seems to me, and we were talking again about this, is the biggest thing that's going to be happening between now and the next probably few years is, don't spend your Bitcoin, hodl all the way, but lend and use it as collateral to get a loan out.
Leverage, yeah.
And use leverage, yeah. And then once you've got that, then actually it's a game changer, because actually then in theory, your Bitcoin's going up over the 4-year period. And you're just, leveraging. But obviously, I'm not here shouting about take your loan out as much as possible. Be responsible, most importantly, and do a lot of research, because it comes at a huge risk as well, especially in today's market where we're looking at sort of 13%,
13%,
rates,
yeah.
which is quite a lot. But
if they get that down, right?
Yeah, well, Jack from Strike was talking about getting down single figures. If that happens, that's a game changer. We're talking almost comparing it to real estate and real estate rates as well,
Yeah. What about some of the benefits, other benefits to business? You say you've bought Bitcoin through your business, right?
Yeah. So I look at it from two sides. For me, it's mainly for my clients that I work with. I work with a few high net worth individuals, but also small businesses. And the common question really is how do you move Bitcoin onto the balance sheet for a business and on a personal level? So we look at different ways of securing that, looking at ways you can actually put it into a special cold wallet, and moving into sort of multi-sig storage. So you've got like your regular, this is a cold card wallet, which is really, really secure, really good. But then looking at a level up, which is like a multi-sig approach. So you've got different keys in different locations. I think it's happening more and more now on a global level, where there's a huge security risk with Bitcoin. And companies will see that, but also if you're a personal investor, you need to be very, very careful and vigilant, not to scare anybody, but Bitcoin's worth a lot of money, and there's going to be people out there that want to get hold of that. And it's a case of, security is going to be really, really, really important, and securing the Bitcoin, but also making sure you've got offsite solutions and vaults, implemented into a strategy. Yeah. So with me, with Bitcoin and buying it through a business, there's two ways of doing it. Obviously, you've got a business a business exchange that you can buy or set up. So it could be Strike, Kraken, Coinbase, whatever you want. Get that set up, then you can buy through that. But then the second part really is to make sure you've got that security level implemented as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, if you wanna set up a business, a way of buying and receiving or exchanging Bitcoin through your business account, I recommend a company called Bridge to Bitcoin. We had Chris speak at our event recently, and he's so passionate about it, and it take you a few minutes to set up. So we'll stick the links in the description for that. Yeah, really, really great, really easy to do, and it's being like it's spreading like wildfire. More and more businesses are accepting Bitcoin as payment. And if you're a business, it's great if you're accepting Bitcoin payments. That is potentially a great revenue, like a great income stream. Like you're growing. You take a Bitcoin payment, all of a sudden you might have 30% more value on your P&L than you did just selling your regular product using fiat currency. So it's definitely well worth looking into.
I'm actually, sorry, can I just say I'm working with a guy actually in London Bridge. He's an entrepreneur and it's a healthcare specialist. Recruitment, they've got surplus cash. And you find a lot of companies like this. They've got so much cash on the P&L, on the balance sheet. And they're just like, what do I do with this cash now? And we're going through this, a lot of people are saying it, do I go into real estate or do I put it into gold, stocks and shares or Bitcoin? And this guy knows about Bitcoin. So we're setting him up on a security level basically in that. So I think it's happening now. People are starting to wake up and kind of understand more about Bitcoin and how it can benefit the business in the long run. Because you look at people like Strategy, obviously Michael Saylor's a good case, Meta Planet. The reason they're doing this is because it betters the business in the long run.
Yeah. So what about what do you recommend as the route to buying Bitcoin from start to finish, from
a business
platform to get it in, and hard wallet, cold wallet?
It's a good question, but business or personal or both? No, it doesn't really make much
change, let's just say that, I'd say personal.
Okay. Yeah. I think the first and foremost is, like we said earlier on, do your Bitcoin research, go down that rabbit hole, study it a bit more, understand how you can buy, what are the decent exchanges to look at, so look at reputable exchanges. Do you want KYC exchanges if you're doing it on a personal level, or non-KYC? Do you want to deal with DEXs, which are decentralized exchanges that aren't really on the network as per se? Even though they're becoming a bit more challenging, I think, in the UK markets. And then once you've got your chosen provider, let's just say, hypothetically, we're talking about Strike today, and you choose Strike as your option to go and buy, set up an account, and then once you're comfortable, do a few transactions. And I think this was the biggest thing for me, was it's quite scary, because you're sending money to an unknown entity initially, and then you want to see that money come from a bank account into an exchange account. Once you've done that, that's great. You can start to do larger amounts of money and, I suppose, build up a bit more confidence, really. And then it's more of a case of just looking at how do you then secure. And that's when it becomes a bit more difficult, because then you've got to start looking at, Ledger or Cold Card, different brands, of cold wallet storage, and really understand the fundamentals of those, the technology behind them, and how it actually works. My suggestion really is, and I've done this in the last probably 18 months, is to really get under the hood of what a cold wallet actually is. And it's understanding the metrics behind it, having the keys, the private keys and the public keys, and understanding how does it transfer. Because before, I was just doing it in the old days when I first started doing Bitcoin. I was like, oh, it works.
Yeah.
But I think that's where my anxiety came from, because I used to wait sometimes doing large amounts of Bitcoin transactions, for clients, and it'd be sitting there in the ether, because the settlement time is 10 minutes. And I'm sitting there with
10
people.
minutes is a long time.
It is, right? When you do large amounts of money, you're speaking with a client, they're like, "Is my money arrived yet?" I'm like, "Not yet, but it's coming." And then suddenly, ping, it comes in. So I think it's just understanding how the transaction works, the time behind the transaction, and how does a cold wallet work. Once you've got that, you can send large amounts and it's really no problem. It really isn't, And I think now, especially with these devices, and I think a lot of the devices are starting to come out like this now, and that is they use QR code. So before I was cut and pasting the keys in to send, the wallet addresses and the value. Now you can just do QR code and scan it. And that takes that kind of liability away.
User error as well.
Yeah, and the friction.
Getting anything wrong.
Yeah. There's horror stories, as you know, people missing one digit, and then the money's
It's
gone.
gone.
You can't
Yeah,
call it
yeah.
back. You can't call the bank.
No.
It's like that's your friend, and your friend just let you down. So I think that helps. But yeah, that's the fundamentals for me. Is cold storage, understanding the metrics behind that, and the technology really.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. All right. Future of it.
Oh.
There's countries like El Salvador. Do you think any more are going to come online, utilize it the way that they have?
Yeah, I do think. Well, America's doing it, but state by state.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's I don't know if we're stuck in this Trump bubble at the moment, which I'm sure we are, where he's trying to sell everything to the world. And will it work for America? Will America bring it in? Look, I'm hopeful. I just don't know. He's a salesman, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, if it all gets passed by the Senates, and each state passes and brings on Bitcoin as a reserve asset, then fantastic. I think it's. I watched the news yesterday morning, and America's 36 trillion in debt.
Yep.
And that's just going up and up.
Yeah.
They're just going to keep printing that money, and you bring on Bitcoin, and if you put that on the balance sheet of the country, then actually they were saying they could. I think it was like 10 years they could eradicate that debt, 10 or 15 years, I can't remember, if they put an XYZ amount in to clear the debt. So in theory, the thesis behind Bitcoin is amazing for a country. You can really reduce that. And there's no other way really of reducing that debt that quickly.
No.
So I think if it plays out how everyone says it's going to play out, then I think all countries and companies, and I think we are going through that. 2025, 2026 and 2027 is going to be institution adoption and country adoption massively. I think we've started that wave.
Institution adoption is like BlackRock.
Yes, tokenization.
Yeah.
Well, no, I read this morning actually. What was it? It was Solana.
Solana, yeah.
Solana's been adopted by the banks.
Yeah.
To tokenize everything. That's game changing. I'm not an advocate for Solana, by the way. Although I do like Solana, but we're not here about that.
Yeah. No, but every week or every month there seems to be another big move. A big announcement that only looks promising for the future of Bitcoin. And I think unless you're in that world, hearing it and your ears are plucked up to hear it, then you're going to stay in the land of this is scary, this is risky, this is and look, it's all risky. Life's risky. Putting your money in a house is risky.
Yeah.
You don't own the house. The bank owns the house unless you've paid your mortgage off, and you don't own your money if it's in the bank. The bank sits up. That's it. Goodbye. So
look at the conversation we had offline. We did Jay and I were talking about a small transaction that was made on Bitcoin for a client last week, and it got stopped. This is the world we're living at the moment. Things can happen. We've got no control over things. And again, that's kind of what I like about Bitcoin is that control that I feel I've got. Mm-hmm. The moment you leave the TradFi system and you do get that Bitcoin and you put it onto a cold wallet, then I feel I've got that control back. Whereas at the moment, I feel like my bank account, which has, for this particular client, locked. Okay, it's only a KYC check, but still, why are we having this?
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
What you do find as well with a lot of banks like Halifax and, who's the other flipping? Lloyd's, not Lloyd's, there's another one. But you find that if you do open a Strike account, for instance, and all of a sudden you're chucking money into Bitcoin, they'll ring you. They'll stop it and they'll want you to answer a load of questions as to why you're buying Bitcoin, because they don't really want you to buy Bitcoin. Your bank will not want you to buy Bitcoin, and that can be off-putting enough, right? So I wonder how many people have gone to actually make a transaction to Bitcoin and then been alarmed and put off by this security call from their bank saying, why are you doing that? And then they're like, oh yeah, that's made me feel uneasy, so I won't do that. But your bank is, of course, your bank is incentivized to not get you to buy Bitcoin, because that will be basically putting them out of a job. The bank is the middle person, and they don't want you to buy Bitcoin because you're doing them out of a job by buying Bitcoin. So that's why they're doing that. Don't be too alarmed.
It was like my friend. He works for Thames Water. I think I said to you a minute ago when we started the call.
Yeah,
and. The questions that came up on Coinbase were so deep that he had no idea how to answer them. It was just like, And then at the end it says you failed the quiz. By which time he then called me up and said, look, I can't be bothered with this. It's just not right. So then that's actually putting people off. And
how many people have done that? Right? Yeah. I remember when I opened a Strike account, I failed the quiz on the first thing because two of the answers were really similar, and it was like a reverse question where it was no instead of yes kind of thing.
I failed one of those as well not too long ago for a friend of mine.
Right.
It's weird because it's trying to work it out back to front and trying to catch you out.
Exactly. Yeah, and obviously I get why they do that, but even me, I failed it, and I was like, and you can't do it for 24 hours after. That's right. It's like, oh god, I could have left it, but I didn't. But I wonder how many people do leave it.
It must be amazing. It must be loads, and I ended up doing those questions for him, and even I found it difficult to start with. And it was like, oh my god, we passed it anyway. Now he's bought into Bitcoin, but yeah, it's just I think that's the thing. I think the UK specifically is they're against Bitcoin. We're very very archaic over here in terms of adoption. Look at America. They're really. He's changing it.
Yeah.
Trump for the better. And if he does pull through on this capital gains tax 0%, I think that's amazing. That's what we need. And UAE. I've got friends that live in Dubai. It's a no-brainer to be living in UAE if you're into crypto. And unfortunately, the UK is so far behind. I think we need to have changes, for the better. I don't think it will happen under this party with Labour. And certainly, it certainly won't happen under Labour.
No.
And in fact, they came out of a framework, I think it was yesterday or this week, got released about crypto for 2026 and how they're bolting on to every single exchange for every single transaction, which was only a matter of time anyway. And I get questions, funny enough, just to go off on a bit of a tangent, but I had quite a few questions that come up and people are like, don't worry about it. Just stick your crypto into cold wallet and then spend on a credit card or a card that's linked to your cold wallet. And it's like, you've got to wake up. People are like, your money is being tracked no matter what. So make sure you cover your taxes, most importantly,
Yeah. Yeah. Inland revenue and the government on taxes, they are very slow at catching up, but they eventually will catch up.
100%.
They
100%.
They always do, and it might be years, it might be 10 years, 15 years even, but they do.
Well, and also they've got that back data, right? You've got every single data on the exchange, which they can come for you in the future and say, look, 5 years you haven't paid tax on these gains.
Yeah.
So I just my advice is be very very careful.
Yeah.
Actually, I use, just while on that note, I use a crypto tax calculator, which is pretty good. There's quite a few of them out there.
I heard you mention this before.
Yeah, they're good. I use about 5, and I think it's still very, very new at the moment. So they work, but a lot of them don't seem to get the wallet totals correct.
Yeah.
Because there's so much data, and there's a lot of velocity coming from different transactions. But I use Coinly, and it seems to match out what the wallets say. Right. So if I've got ledger wallets or whatever for my clients, I can analyze those for them and then look at their tax bill for them at the end of the year and submit that to the accountant. So if you look at things like that, Coinly works really well because it shows you your gains across every single wallet.
Right.
You can use that from a business perspective, but also a personal level. And you can really track, every time. So I think it's really, really beneficial to look at those as well,
Yeah, I think there was, I think it might have been Coinly I was looking at as well, but it would be great if they linked to Xero and QuickBooks and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure eventually they will, but it's basically a way where your accountant can just get a summary at the end of the year and go, yeah, that's,
exactly.
That's the profit and loss. Awesome, man. Look, I want to just say at this stage, nothing we've said here is any type of recommendation. No. It's just a discussion between two neighbours who are enthusiastic about building wealth and Bitcoin and all the rest of it. So do your research. Make sure you know what you're doing. If it is something that plucks your ears, and if you're listening still to this episode, because you probably would have switched off if it was something you wasn't, then you've been listening for like 40 minutes, 45 minutes. It might be just the idea now to just go and get a book, go and do some research, go and look up blockchain, just start with understanding what it is, how it works, how you buy it, without even buying it, just find out how you buy it, how you transfer it to cold wallets, what cold wallets are, and then just do some research on who's adopting it, and who's buying it and why they're buying it, and eventually you'll start to go into a rabbit hole where you'll end up on this podcast talking about it. No. But Simon, thanks for coming on, mate. It's been a great discussion.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Like I
No.
said, we've been trying to get it sorted for a long time, and it's my travel time was great because it was literally just hop over the fence, which is really cool.
He's literally my next door neighbour, and he is talking about Bitcoin a lot on his social media. So tell everyone where they can find you. I know you mentioned your channel, but what?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok. Just type in Simon Elias, Elias, and the same for YouTube as well.
Great. Okay, go and check him out. And until next time, guys, have a great rest of your day and weekend, and we'll see you then.